They set her up as a joke on a blind date, but the single dad CEO Millionaire froze everyone by proposing. Jenna adjusted her cardigan sleeves nervously as she stepped off the bus and onto the stone-paved sidewalk in front of Rosewood Bistro. The golden lights of the upscale restaurant flickered against the fading twilight, and every part of her body screamed at her to turn around. She clutched her phone tightly in her hand, glancing once more at the message Clara had sent. "Just go in, Jen. He's already there. I swear, it's not as bad as it sounds." Jenna Harper, 26, had once believed in the kind of love you read about in books. That belief had crumbled 2 years ago, when she discovered her boyfriend of 3 years had used her savings, money she had set aside to help her ailing mother, to fund a tech startup. A month later, he left. Not just her, but the city. With her best friend. Since then, she had built a wall around herself, quiet mornings, numbers on spreadsheets, grocery runs for her mother, and evenings spent reading beside her in the hospital room. Love, she had decided, was a luxury people like her could no longer afford. So when Vanessa, the loudest voice in the office and the queen of passive-aggressive smirks, insisted that someone wanted to meet Jenna, she knew something was off. "He's into quiet girls," Vanessa had said with a sly grin. "Single dad, a little older, harmless. Actually begged me for your number." The giggles that followed weren't subtle, neither were the sidelong glances. Jenna had immediately declined. Blind dates weren't her thing, especially ones arranged by someone who clearly didn't like her. But Clara, her one real friend at work, had taken her aside that afternoon, her face slightly pale. "Look, they're making a game of it," Clara admitted. "They've booked a table for you and this guy at Rosewood. Vanessa's planning to be there. I tried to get you out of it, but she made it look like I was the one who set it up." "So it's a joke?" Jenna had asked flatly, her throat tightening. Clara had looked at the floor. "I think so. But the guy, he might not know. Or maybe he does. I don't know, Jen. But I swear, I didn't mean for it to go this far." In the end, out of a strange mix of pride and quiet anger, Jenna had agreed to go. She told herself it was better to show up, get it over with, and walk away with her head high. Clara had come with her to the restaurant door and then lingered outside, too ashamed to go in. Now, standing at the entrance, Jenna inhaled deeply and stepped inside. The hostess led her past rows of soft candlelit tables and right toward the corner, where she spotted the table Vanessa had reserved. As she approached, she saw him, a man already seated, but he wasn't alone. Sitting beside him in a little booster seat was a tiny girl, maybe 4 years old, with a head full of brown curls and a plush bunny clutched tightly in her arms. Jenna froze. That was when she heard it, snickering. To her right, just 2 tables away, Vanessa sat with 3 other co-workers, all pretending to sip their drinks while glancing at their phones. One of them had their camera pointed casually in Jenna's direction. "Oh my God," one whispered just loud enough for Jenna to hear. "He actually brought his kid. This is unreal." "Who brings a toddler to a blind date?" another laughed, cringe level. "Maxim." Jenna's face burned. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears. Every instinct told her to walk away, to bolt for the door, but the little girl had looked up from her bunny and smiled at her. A smile so innocent and pure, it cut straight through the embarrassment. The man stood when he saw her, pulling out the chair across from him. He had kind eyes, deep-set, tired maybe, but kind. His shirt was plain, his hair slightly tousled, not at all the creepy older guy image Vanessa had painted. "Hi," he said gently. "You must be Jenna. I'm Brian, and this," he gestured to the child, "is Sophie." Jenna looked from him to Sophie, who gave her a tiny wave, then back to Brian. The snickering from the other table buzzed in her ears like static. She sat down, and with that one quiet act of defiance, the laughter behind her began to falter. Jenna shifted in her seat, smoothing her skirt as she tried to steady her breathing. She kept her gaze down, but she could feel the heat of stares and snickers from the nearby table. She could hear Vanessa's voice, too loud to be accidental. "I mean, really," Vanessa laughed. "She's actually sitting there, with that guy and his kid." Jenna clenched her hands under the table, forcing herself to ignore it. Across from her, Brian adjusted Sophie's little sweater as the girl munched quietly on a breadstick, humming a tune only she understood. He looked up and met Jenna's eyes with a calm, almost apologetic smile. "Again, I'm really sorry about this," he said softly. "I know this probably isn't what you were expecting. My babysitter canceled last minute. I nearly called to cancel too, but..." He paused, seeming unsure whether to continue, then added, "But I really didn't want to miss meeting you." Jenna blinked, caught off guard. There was no arrogance in his voice, no defensiveness, just sincerity. "It's okay," she replied, her voice lower than she intended. "Really?" It wasn't, at least not at first. The setup was humiliating, the whispers behind her insufferable, but there was something about Brian's presence that disarmed her. He was tall, yes, but not in an intimidating way. His features carried a quiet weariness, laugh lines around his eyes, a small scar near his temple, like a man who had lived 1,000 lives before sitting at this table. He wore a plain dark button-down and jeans, nothing flashy, everything about him felt grounded. And then there was Sophie. The little girl sat still for a moment, then reached into her tiny backpack and pulled out a small pad of paper and a purple crayon. She glanced up at Jenna, then began to draw with intense focus. Brian leaned slightly closer across the table. "She loves to draw, mostly princesses and dinosaurs, sometimes both." Jenna smiled despite herself. "That's a very unique combination." "She has range," Brian said with a chuckle. A few moments passed in silence. Jenna began to relax, her shoulders lowering inch by inch. The restaurant's soft lighting cast a warm glow across the table. The clinking of forks and quiet hum of conversations filled the space around them, but Jenna found herself focusing more on the way Brian occasionally glanced at Sophie, always gently attentive, always present. Sophie finally held up her paper and beamed. "Look," she chirped, waving it toward Jenna. Jenna took the picture with both hands. It was a crayon drawing of a blonde girl in a long purple gown, complete with sparkles and a golden crown. "Is this me?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," Sophie nodded. "You look like a princess." Jenna's throat tightened unexpectedly. "He doesn't say that often," Brian added, watching his daughter with clear affection. "Her usual favorite is a triceratops named Rosie." Jenna laughed quietly, touched. "I'm honored." She was about to say more when movement caught her eye. One of the women from Vanessa's table stood and began walking toward them, feigning casualness as she approached. "Oh, hey," the woman said with mock surprise. "I didn't know you were into this kind of thing." Jenna's smile faltered. The woman looked directly at Sophie, then back at Jenna. "I mean, you must know you're the kind of girl who ends up on dates with single dads, right? Kind of perfect, actually." Jenna froze. Before she could respond, Brian stood up slowly, still calm but firm. He gently placed one hand on Sophie's small shoulder and then looked the woman in the eyes. "I'm proud to be a father," he said, evenly. "And I know how to respect the woman sitting across from me far more than anyone at that table seems to." The woman's smirk faltered. She blinked, scoffed, and turned away. Brian sat back down, looking across the table at Jenna again. "Sorry about that,"